A big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. So in this video, I'm going to climb up a mountain and hopefully get sunrise over this amazing peninsula. And I'm also going to talk a little bit more about photographing new locations. When you've never been there before, how do I go about planning and photographing that?
Don't want to sleep tonight at all.
Morning everybody, fantastic to see you all again. So this is the last day that I've got in Madeira, and what I wanted to do today was talk to you a little bit more about how I approach planning a new location. I've never been here before, and we're also going to go on a hike up to a viewpoint over the peninsula on the eastern side of the island to hopefully catch sunrise. Now there's no clouds at all, so I'm not sure how good it's going to be, but it'll be great to get up there and see what we can find. So it's about a 20-minute hike, I think. So I'm going to get my stuff. I have got all my lenses, my trio of lenses, and yeah, should be good. So I met up with another photographer on yesterday, and he's been up here before, so that's really handy. Because one of the things when you travel into a new location like this is knowing where to go. Obviously, if you're hiking for sunrise, then if you haven't recce'd it, then you might not know exactly the route to take. So it's really good to have somebody to come along with me today. So one of the things that I wanted to speak about was just how I decide on which locations to go to when I go to a new photography country. And I think a lot of that comes down to research prior to that. And I'm going to go back into the studio and talk to you about the research I did for Madeira after I've done this sunrise hike. But what I tend to do is pick probably 2, maybe at most 3 locations that I want to really photograph well, and know that I'm going to go back to those locations maybe 3 or 4 times, rather than thinking I'm going to want to photograph everything on the island in this case. Because it's not like I'm doing tourism photography. What I'm trying to do is landscape photography, where I want to come away from this with maybe 3 or 4 amazing images, and the only way to do that is go back to those locations multiple times. So obviously the Fennel Forest was one of them. There was a hike to one of the top of the mountains, I can't remember the name, I'll put it here, but that's one that I did a recce hike I went back to, and I'm going to go tomorrow morning probably to do sunrise at that as well. So those 2 are the 2 main locations, and everything else is just a bonus really. I'm probably not going to go to them in multiple times like this one, and I'm just going to go and see what I can get and hopefully have good conditions. But yeah, I'll talk a little bit more when we get to the top. We're not far off now, the sun is coming up. Closer to the equator here, sunrise is a little bit quicker. You don't have as much golden hour or blue hour, but yeah, it's pretty amazing. Okay, onward. Can't see anything. So I made it to the top, and if my wife's watching, then I'm not near the edge at all. There's a little bit of an edge there. So this reminds me a little bit of the Faroe Islands actually, or Scotland. It's just so rugged. The coastline's beautiful here. I've got my 40mm lens on at the moment, and it's just about getting everything. I think I'm still going to have to do a bit of a pano, so I'll probably go to my 24mm lens and do a vertical pano, because I want to get on the left hand side there, you can see where the waves are and the rocks are. I don't really want to cut them off because it won't feel right. It'll feel too enclosed in the image. So I'm going to make sure that I try and get those in. I'm going to take some now before sunrise to try and get this sort of feel of this golden hour. And really, there's not a huge amount of foreground. I'll probably go a little bit lower when I set up my shot and try and get some of this really interesting lichen on the volcanic rock here, and yeah, there's a nice sweeping line that takes your eye round all the way to the headland. It looks pretty amazing, to be honest. And now I'm going to move away from the edge. Oh, the other thing I should say is, bad news, there's not going to be any drone footage, which would have been, this would have been probably the best place to do drone footage, but I crashed it again. Yep. So my fault completely, it's gone forever. I got most of the footage off it because the night before, so I didn't lose too much. Okay, I'm going to set up and then we'll talk again. This is a wide scene, so what I've done is I've just used my phone, and I'll just show you exactly what I've done. So I've just basically just moved around. I've got it on this ultra wide setting, and I've moved around to try and figure out where I want to be, taking care not to cut off some of these rocks. I want to make sure that this area here isn't cut off, but obviously it's not going to fit in. Even on 14mm, I can't fit the whole scene in. So what I've got to then do is decide, do I want to do a 14mm pano? And if I do that, then I'll probably leave it in this orientation and just move it a little bit, because I don't have to move it that far. If I just show you on here, you can see that. So I want to get from there on the left-hand side here, and I want to be able to get it to there. Now the problem is that the foreground has parallax error. So as I move with this at 14mm, I think I'm going to struggle to blend that together. So what I'm going to do, just to be safe, is I'm going to take one with this, which I've just done, and then I'm going to take one with my 24-70 at 24mm and do multiple. And then hopefully that'll give me a little bit more chance to do that. I'll probably move back a little bit, and hopefully that'll get it there. Now the problem is, as well, there's no clouds in the sky, and there's cloud a little bit on the horizon, so it's probably the worst conditions for sunrise. Well, apart from it being completely cloudy. But yeah, so hopefully I can get something. Apart from that, everything takes care of itself, really. There's not a huge amount of compositions here, I don't think. The sun hasn't quite happened in this direction. There's definitely a bank of cloud on the horizon, but we've got a nice bit of pink sky in the opposite direction. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about coming to a new location and how important it is to try and get a sense of that location by going back to similar places. So, when I first went to Fanal, after I arrived on the plane, I went there and didn't actually take any photos, just walked around to try and understand a little bit more about the actual location and to try and sort of immerse myself in it a little bit. I took a few phone shots. Obviously, if the conditions had been great, then I'd probably taken some more, but I then got a sense of where the sun was going to come, what it might look like when there's fog there. And so when I went back when there was fog, I knew a little bit more. And then I could look at those photos. I went back to my room and looked at the photos I'd taken in the fog, and then looked at the mistakes I'd made, and then I could go back again and improve those. And then the other thing, when I went to the mountain, the first time I went to the wrong side of the mountain, and then when I went back, I found that even though I'd looked on Google Earth at where the sun was going to rise and set, that I actually would be better at sunrise, and that's what I'm going to do tomorrow morning. And so those two locations that I really want to photograph have required multiple visits. And those multiple visits allow me to understand the lay of the land, but they also allow me to sort of connect a little bit more with them. And that's really, really important in landscape photography. I think too often people just try and tick off all the locations in a particular spot, and you just end up going home with lots of average shots rather than 2 or 3 amazing shots. Now, it may be that you're happy with that, and you may get lucky, but I think it's important to really immerse yourself in a few places. Right, come on, son.
Sunflowers, high grass, and bare feet. Oh, but you each second is a treat. I keep my balance next to you.
Obviously, as you can see now, I'm back in my studio and I've been editing these photos, and it's really interesting actually because I went to this location for the first time and it was the only location that was probably one that was on my list, but I knew that I probably could only make one visit to, and I got a little bit unlucky because there was no clouds in the sky, but I got lucky because I found somebody who had been there before and knew exactly where to go, which massively helped. But I wanted to show you two things. One is the mistake I made with this photo, because it was a really difficult photo to take and I made a stupid mistake. I'll come on to that in a minute. But the first thing is I want to show you how I planned this photograph and why I thought it was going to work and I thought it was worth going to take. So this is the photographer's ephemeris, and you can see here this is where I went. I climbed up from here to the top of this little hill here, and then I looked over this peninsula right down here, and you can see that I've set it for the day I was there, and the sunrise was right over this peninsula here. And so I did think that there was going to be a really good opportunity to get something quite good. The problem was that there was cloud on the horizon. So by the time the sun had got above the cloud on the horizon, it had got quite bright and it was quite difficult to expose right. But I made a stupid mistake because I actually didn't exposure bracket low enough. And if I've just reduced the exposure of this shot here, you can see that I blew out this whole entire region here, and what I wanted was just a circle of the sun here so I could blend it in a lot better. I mean, the rest of the shot is perfect, and I'll just get the exposure right so it's about there. Yeah, you know, I love the shot. I think everything's worked pretty well, but I overexposed it, which is such a shame. I mean, obviously, if you had some clouds in the sky, then I'd have had more sky, and I think that'd have balanced the shot a little bit more as well. But the photographer's ephemeris really helped me. The other thing that helped me was using Google Pro. So this is Google Pro, Google Earth Pro, and what you can see here is this is the place where I hiked up, and you can then see from there, this is where the sunrise is. And this is really good because you can look at it from any direction you want, and you can also set the sun. So this is just before sunrise, and you can see how it's going to hit the mountains as it rises. So it's just a good way of getting some indication which bits of mountain are going to be lit up. And I knew there was going to be a little bit here and a little bit here on the mountain. And you know, before I went, I knew that this bit and this bit was going to be lit up by the sun. So I knew that there was going to be a really good chance of getting something interesting, because these bits here I think are really nice. They just give some depth to the image. The other thing that's worth mentioning with this is this was a stack of 4 40mm shots. So the actual 40mm shot's about here, and it just, even that wasn't wide enough, so it's quite difficult, and you get a little bit of lens distortion that's actually quite hard to correct, and this becomes then very small in the picture. I mean, I don't think I did it quite as much with this one. So this is a shot just with the 14mm, and you can see that it's overexposed, but it's got not quite as much distortion as this one, but I do prefer this shot. So I hope that's helped. Before I go, I just want to say thanks to Squarespace, who have once again sponsored this episode. If you're looking for a website, or you're looking for an online store or a place to put your photos as a photographer, maybe you're thinking of selling your photos and you want to set up a print store, then Squarespace is a fantastic place to go. I use it for selling all my prints, use it for selling my book, my calendar, and also sharing things on my blog as well. It's super easy to use. You don't have to have any technical skills. So if you're looking to get a website, then make sure you go to squarespace.com/Nigel for 10% off, or use offer code Nigel. Okay, that's it for this week. I hope you've liked it. This shot was not quite what I wanted, but hopefully you got some insight into how I go about a new location like this. And yeah, I thought it was worth sharing, even though the image wasn't quite what I wanted. Until next Sunday, bye.
It's what we choose to